tal? Los saluda Karina Yapor. Bienvenidos a Voz News. Continuamos con nuestra cobertura especial desde la Convención Nacional Republicana en Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Esta noche hay una gran expectativa ante lo que será el discurso del expresidente Donald Trump. Allegados al expresidente han confirmado que él había estado trabajando hace una semana precisamente en este discurso. Sin embargo, después del ataque, el atentado que sufrió el pasado sábado, decidió descartarlo y ha preparado un nuevo mensaje que se espera sea mucho más unificador. Pero anoche, J.D. Vance, el senador por Ohio y candidato a la vicepresidencia del país, estuvo en el escenario y ofreció un emotivo discurso compartiendo parte de su historia, pero también enfocándose en la crisis económica que muchos estadounidenses enfrentan, logrando así conectar con el público de esta convención. Vanessa Vallejo nos tiene un recuento de ello. Vanessa.
Hoy es el cuarto y último día de la Convención Nacional Republicana y aunque hoy los ojos están esperando al expresidente Donald Trump, ya ayer en la noche vimos uno de los discursos más esperados. El discurso del elegido por Donald Trump como vicepresidente, el senador por Ohio J.D. Vance. Un senador que para algunos todavía no era muy conocido y que por lo tanto ayer precisamente ese discurso era una especie de presentación no solo ante la convención, no solo ante los republicanos, sino ante el país entero, es que quería saber quién es este joven, porque es muy joven, quién es este joven que ha escogido Donald Trump como su fórmula vicepresidencial. Lo que vimos fue un discurso muy emotivo y como muchos esperábamos, un discurso que se enfocó en gran parte en su historia de vida. J.D. Vance tiene una historia de vida que para muchos encarna lo que es el sueño americano. Un joven que creció cuando era niño en una familia muy pobre, creció educado por su abuela, su madre con problemas de drogadicción y sin embargo este joven se enlista en los Marines, logra un título en Yale y luego logra llegar al Senado de Estados Unidos y ahora está como fórmula vicepresidencial de Donald Trump. Hizo un recorrido por toda su historia y habló de cómo un eventual gobierno del presidente Donald Trump y él como vicepresidente se enfocaría en que esos americanos trabajadores tengan la oportunidad para salir adelante y que el sueño americano se cumpla en todas esas historias de aquellos que tal vez en este momento lo ven tan lejos. También habló muy particularmente de la economía, concentrándose en cómo beneficiar a los trabajadores, haciendo un poco esa invitación, yo creo que ya de cara a la campaña, a ese voto del americano trabajador, que las medidas de Joe Biden están afectando su bolsillo y habló particularmente de cómo ese eventual gobierno con el expresidente Donald Trump podría ayudar a los americanos en la parte económica. Y sin duda el momento más emotivo del discurso de ayer fue el momento en el que saluda a su madre. Veamos este momento.
And I'm proud to say that tonight my mom is here. 10 years clean and sober. I love you, Mom.
Bueno, pues una presentación de J.D. Vance ante el país entero, muy emotiva, muy cargada de hechos personales y muy enfocada hacia la economía.
Gracias, Vanessa, por este reporte. Y aún hay muchas interrogantes sobre lo que ocurrió el pasado sábado durante el atentado en contra del expresidente Donald Trump. Mark Green es congresista por Tennessee, pero también él es el director del Comité de Seguridad Interna de la Cámara de Representantes de los Estados Unidos. Platicamos con él sobre la investigación que estará llevando a cabo el Congreso en relación a los hechos ocurridos el pasado sábado. Veamos lo que nos dijo. Está con nosotros el congresista Mark Green, representante por Tennessee, y también él es el director del Departamento de Seguridad Interna de los Estados Unidos. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Congressman, there are many questions about the lack of preparation and the response of the Secret Service during the rally of President Trump on Saturday. I know that you guys are conducting an investigation, and we'll have some audiences next week. Please tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions. The site team that went and looked at that site decided not to put someone on that building. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why it wasn't included in the Secret Service perimeter doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Of course.
And the explanations in the media from the head of the Secret Service about the slope of the building, that really makes no sense to anyone, right? When the slope on the White House is a little even steeper, right?
Of course.
And then there's the response time of the counter sniper, who at the 8 o'clock position was supposed to be covering that building. We're going to be digging into all of that. So lots of questions that we have to ask and get answers to.
Absolutely. It was just revealed also that there had been some Iranian threats against former President Donald Trump. So, and supposedly they had increased his security because of those threats. Just imagine. How are you going to try to find out what happened, but most importantly, to grant a transparent investigation about what happened?
Yeah, so that's the challenge. We've got to get the departments to cooperate, right? And in the past, at least when it came to the southern border, Alejandro Mayorkas has not been very cooperative. Hence, we impeached him for a lot of things, but one of them was just not responding to the oversight from Congress, which is a part of the Constitution and the separation of powers. He has totally disregarded those things. So we sent a request, but we're going to be very quick with subpoenas if we don't get a response.
Some of the things that, of course, people is talking about the most is the fact that the shooter were there, that people in the public noticed him, that they were trying to alert the authorities, and the lack of response. So that's not normal, as you just mentioned. That's not normal. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. For the Hispanic community, it's especially shocking because a lot of us have came from countries where we have seen this happening, and we will never thought that this could happen here in the United States.
Yeah, nothing like this has happened since Ronald Reagan. It's a tragedy. Of course, in this case, someone actually lost their life. So we have got to get to the bottom of it and make sure that something like this never happens again. And hopefully that means transparency and that we can get into the information and we can hold people accountable. But clearly, it doesn't look like right now they're going to be very transparent.
Do you think that we could see another assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump?
Well, look, there are people who hate him. There are people who hate, on both sides of the aisle, right? We've got to dial the rhetoric down in this country and unite the country again. And I think Donald Trump can do that. But the problem is I think it all started with texting. Okay, so we would say things in text that we would never say face to face. And then social media just made that much easier. And as people's conscience got torn down by the ease of doing it online, now people talk that way to each other's face, and there's this vitriol in the country. It's okay to disagree with someone. It's okay to disagree firmly. It's not okay to hate, and it's certainly not okay to do what happened this weekend.
And you just mentioned the border, the crisis that we have at the border. I think that jeopardizes, of course, national security.
100%.
So what would you tell to the Hispanic community, and why do you think a Republican federal government will do a much better job than Biden has done?
I think it's really important to know that the asylum process is not going to go away with a Republican who comes in. People who are in trouble and who need assistance are going to get the assistance they need. But what we will stop are the drug cartel trafficked human beings. We will stop the drugs that are being brought in over an open border. We will stop this increase in terrorists that have been confronted at the border and many who've gotten through. For example, the 8 ISIS folks that were just recently elected are,
detained,
arrested.
Yes.
Those individuals, I think it was 3 of them, used Mayorkas' CBP One app to get into the country across the southern border.
Yes.
So again, a Republican president does not mean that asylum and all those things are going to go away, right? People in need will get taken care of. But it does mean the laws will be enforced, and all those other things that we don't want in our country are not going to be allowed in our country.
Absolutely. So now, coming back to the National Republican Convention. Yeah. So how do you like it? I mean,
the convention?
Yeah.
Oh, these are always incredible. This is my third convention. I got involved in politics about 12 years ago, and actually attended the McCain-Palin one before I was elected, but then, got elected, and they're a lot of fun. They just, you bring like-minded people together, and so yeah, it's pretty cool.
No, it's great, and you're wearing your boots.
I'm wearing my Tennessee boots today. Tennesseans are sporting their cowboy boots, and
just as much as Texans.
As much as Texas. I like reminding my Texas colleagues there wouldn't be a Texas if there wasn't a Tennessee. Those boys all went down there to help out,
Congressman Green, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for stopping by. And finally, a few words in Spanish, because I heard you and you speak a little bit of Español.
No, about all I know is buenos dias. I can order a beer,
Una
cerveza, por favor.
Eso es importante. That's the important thing. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y una de las mujeres que ofrecieron un discurso durante esta convención fue la candidata al Senado por Arizona, Kari Lake. Platicamos con ella sobre la importancia del voto hispano en las próximas elecciones y la crisis migratoria que afecta no solamente a su estado, sino a todo el país.
Well, Kari Lake, thank you for being with us again with Voz News. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So tell me about the first days of the convention. What have you experienced? How's the feeling right now?
Oh, it's so good. It's, the people here are just some of the most patriotic, wonderful, loving people anywhere. And so we're here. It feels like a big family. I'm from a big family. It's a really big family here.
Yes.
And I love looking at the faces in the crowd. It's young. It's older. I'm not going to say old because I'm getting up there. It's young, it's older, it's white, it's black, it's Hispanic, Asian. It's truly what America is. And it's a beautiful thing. I think the messages have been great. I mean, some of them have gotten me excited, ready to go out there and fight even harder. Some of them have moved me to tears when you hear about somebody who lost a loved one because they were killed, or the streets aren't safe. Fentanyl poisoning that's happening, which is so prevalent in Arizona, and sadly Arizona is where that deadly fentanyl is pouring in, and then it's being dispersed across the country and taking a young generation.
Absolutely.
So there's been a lot of messages of, that are very, very positive of what we want to do. What's going on? We can sit and talk about what's wrong in our country. We can do that and complain for a long time because there's a lot going in the wrong direction, but we're about the solutions to get us out of this mess. And that's what I've been hearing.
I think that's very important, and I agree with you. I would like to ask you, of course, we just saw a couple of days ago the assassination attempt against former President Trump, and that's something that was very shocking for all of us, and even for the Hispanic community. Your husband is from Colombia, so a lot of us are reflecting that we are used to see those kind of things and attacks in our countries, but we will never thought that we could see something like that happening here in the U.S. What's going on, and what steps should be taken to prevent this from happening again?
I believe that in the Hispanic Latino community, it is a real shocker. So many people have left their homeland, come to America, immigrated to America, set their roots down because they wanted the freedom. They wanted a secure state. They wanted a political system that was fair and honest. And so many fleeing countries where assassinations over politics did happen. And Colombia is one of them. I mean, in the 90s there were so many assassinations, it was hard to keep track of it all. And so I know it's really alarming for people in the Latino community when they're looking back at their homeland they're originally from and saying, we can't let this happen here. And we don't want this to be our political system. We don't want political persecution. What they've been doing to President Trump, between the lawfare, the persecution of a man, throwing these phony cases at him, trying to destroy him, it made me wonder. I asked myself, why do people hate so much President Trump? And it's because of the media. All I can say, it's been an 8-year smear campaign. The fake news, the mainstream media, Everybody loved President Trump before he ran for office. Yes. And the mainstream media started to run an 8-year smear campaign pushing lies about him to try to turn the public against him. And that's why I called them out last night in my speech. They talk about bring down the tone. The media needs to not only bring down their tone, but start telling the truth. And the truth is that President Trump loves this country. He's willing to give up everything for this country. I'm so happy he's okay.
Yes, thank God. We are too. And
I got a great message from him last night. I missed his phone call after my speech, but he left me a voice message, and it was so wonderful. He sounded great. Voice sounded very strong, and he congratulated me. Had watched my speech and really loved it. So it made my night.
Talking to you, I know that you came from a big family. You have your own family, 75% Hispanic.
Yes.
And you just mentioned the rhetoric that some media uses, and unfortunately, leftist media portrays Republicans as anti-immigrants, as racist people, but I don't see anything like that in yourself and really on any other Republican. So I would like for you to share that with the public, because I think it's important that they get the message. And talking to you, I mean, you care about the same things that most Hispanic families care, which is, good earnings, of course, because we are hard workers. We care about the protection of the family, the freedom, honest government, transparency. So can you talk to our audience about those things that you embrace as well, please?
Well, I'm from a big family of 9, and I'm the youngest, and I was just blessed to have that family, that upbringing. It was difficult, there was struggle, we didn't have enough money, but we had lots of love, and my parents raised me that if I work hard, I can achieve anything in this country. And, the left in the media tries to portray Republicans as anti-immigrant. If I was anti-immigrant, that would mean I didn't love my own family, because my family came here as immigrants many generations ago. And my husband's mother and grandmother were immigrants who came here. I believe in legal immigration, and I believe that we need to encourage people to come here and go through the legal measures. I will tell you, I'm all over the state. We have a 25% Hispanic population in Arizona. I joke my family's 75% because my husband and kids are Latino. But they're concerned about the 12 million people who poured in during this invasion. It's driving down wages or depressing wages. The Hispanic population in Arizona works so hard. They love their family. Many of them are saying, wow, I work so hard. I don't know if there's not enough hours in the day for me to take on any more work. And I want to spend time with my family. The number one issue right now for Hispanics in Arizona, by far, is the economy and the border.
Thank you so much. And I truly believe that they are waking up. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Y precisamente en este día que se espera que hable el expresidente Donald Trump, se ha incrementado ese operativo de seguridad. Seguramente incluso han podido escuchar varios helicópteros que están volando sobre esta zona. Hemos visto un despliegue más fuerte de agentes de seguridad para que todo esto se mantenga seguro ante la próxima llegada del expresidente Donald Trump para ofrecer su discurso esta noche aquí en la Convención Nacional Republicana. Y tuvimos la oportunidad también de platicar con una de las voces que más suenan dentro del movimiento conservador, Kash Patel, quien es un abogado y exfuncionario en la administración Trump del Departamento de Defensa. Bueno, y hoy con nosotros en Voz News está Kash Patel, ex secretario interino de Defensa de los Estados Unidos, entre otras muchas posiciones. Thank you so much for being with us today at Voz News.
This is amazing. Thanks so much for having me on your network.
Thank you. So, Kash, I would like to start. Of course, you have held many offices with former President Donald Trump. So I would like to start by addressing what happened on Saturday and what are the major failures from your perspective of what we saw happening on Saturday.
Well, the singular point of failure is that a president or a former president running for president again was shot. Not shot at, was shot at an outdoor event that was a political event for his candidacy. And so just to have that happen in 2024 America, not 1824, 2024 is shocking. And what I've guarded against is speculation as to what exactly happened, because we don't know. We don't know the cause beyond the effect that President Trump was shot. Thank God he's okay. So we need an investigation, and we can't rely on the FBI and DOJ to say we're going to investigate this, because they have proven through their weaponized form of government, that they're rather busy politicizing the legal apparatus than using it to deliver the truth. So I've called on Congress to have a select committee immediately installed by the Speaker so that we can find out what happened. I don't know what happened. Everybody sees all the videos and tapes, but as a former federal prosecutor, you got to go interview the witnesses. You got to get the messages. You got to get the data. Then you got to subpoena people. Then you got to testify. And so it's a long process. And I don't want to blame anyone yet because I don't know exactly what happened, but there was a monumental failure.
Absolutely. One of the things that people is most concerned about, and the questions that they have is how was the shooter able to even shoot, at a president, at a former president, with all that security around the place?
No, look, I used to be responsible for nuclear football, and I did about 50 trips with the former president when he was in office as president and since then. And it's baffling. Setting up a security perimeter posture and working the intelligence apparatus and local law enforcement is something that is done on a routine basis, and some point of failure occurred. And I can tell you this unequivocally. President Trump's security detail, the Secret Service, are wonderful men and women who have been protecting this man for years and years and years. And they did not have the resources they needed on that day. And for the director of the Secret Service to come out and say, we were never asked for more security, is a flat out lie. I know that happened. People have spoken about it in the media. And so there needs to be immediate accountability for why President Trump didn't receive the security package he needed, especially now we're learning just now that weeks ago, the Biden administration knew from the Iranian regime that there was a death threat against the leading candidate for presidency of the United States, and they still didn't provide increased security. So questions have to be asked internally, not just externally.
Yes, we just saw that yesterday authorities here in around the convention, they arrested a guy who had a weapon on a backpack, an AK-47. What does that tell you after what happened on Saturday?
I think it tells you that the Democrats and the radical left-wing media are running on a platform opposite of the president. President Trump is calling for unity. He's calling for toning down in the rhetoric. He's calling for the mainstream media to not report falsely and to not label him and his supporters. They've called him Hitler in the past. They've called his movement, a Nazi-style movement. That is inflammatory rhetoric. And the type of event, the assassination attempt, doesn't happen overnight. That's years and years of misinformation and disinformation. That's years and years of an individual who's 20 years old being told things in the media that he may not know are true or false and being incentivized by them to perform that kind of act. The same thing happened with this gentleman who was possessing a weapon right here at the RNC. There is a root cause of this, and it goes back years, not days.
Finally, how important is immigration? Because, the left have tried to portray Republicans as anti-immigrants, racist people, but you are an immigrant, I'm an immigrant, so what would you tell Hispanics about that?
Listen, the minorities know it better than anyone else here. We are sons and daughters of immigrants. We are first-generation Americans. They, on the other side of the projection, con artists. We're not the racists. Donald Trump's not the racist. He doesn't play the race card. He's looking to rise all Americans. You're talking about a guy whose dad fled the genocidal dictatorship to come to America and legally immigrate here. That's all we want.
Kash Patel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Y mientras se llega la hora de los discursos, aquí hay un gran ambiente. Les voy a mostrar lo que se ve a las afueras de esta convención. La gente, por supuesto, llegando. Hay gente escuchando música, gente con comida, platicando entre ellos en lo que se abren las puertas. Y con estas imágenes nos vamos a una breve pausa comercial. Quédese con nosotros que ya regresamos con mucho más desde la Convención Nacional Republicana. Que sigue con nosotros en esta transmisión especial. Una que se robó los aplausos y los corazones anoche fue la nieta mayor del expresidente Donald Trump, Kai Trump. Verónica Silveri nos tiene un recuento de los momentos más emotivos de su discurso. Veamos.
El encargado de presentar a la joven Kai fue su padre, Donald Trump Jr.
I want to bring out my eldest daughter and the eldest granddaughter of the President of the United States, your favorite president, Kai Madison Trump.
Explicó que subió al escenario para compartir el lado de su abuelo, que la gente no ve a menudo.
To me, he's just a normal grandpa. He gives us candy and soda when our parents aren't looking. He always wants to know how we're doing in school. When I made the high honor roll, he printed it out to show his friends how proud he was of me.
Asimismo contó que cuando no está en su equipo de golf, su abuelo intenta meterse en su cabeza para presionarla.
But I have to remind him, I'm a Trump too.
La joven explicó cómo vivió y asumió el intento de asesinato contra su abuelo el pasado fin de semana.
And I just want to know if he was okay. It was heartbreaking that someone would do that to another person. A lot of people have put my grandpa through hell, and he's still standing.
Le dijo a su abuelo que era una gran inspiración y que los medios han hecho que parezca una persona diferente, pero lo conocía tal y como es.
Grandpa, you are such an inspiration, and I love you. The media makes my grandpa seem like a different person, but I know him for who he is. He's very caring and loving. He truly wants the best for this country, and he will fight every single day to make America great again. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Verónica. Y precisamente hace unos momentos nos topamos con Donald Trump Jr. y le preguntamos cuál fue la reacción de su papá, el expresidente Donald Trump, ante el emotivo discurso de su nieta. Escuchemos.
Did
President Trump
told you something
about Kai's message last night?
Well, yeah, he was, you know, he was so proud. He was just so proud. And he's like, man, she really, you could see the smile, right? You see the smile when she said that, you know, and that's because I'm a Trump too. And he just, I mean, he gets it. So they have a very close relationship. They spend a lot of time together. And so it was amazing.
Y la voz de los jóvenes será sumamente importante en las próximas elecciones. Tuvimos la oportunidad de platicar con Ana Paulina Luna, de origen mexicano, y quien es la congresista más joven del estado de Florida en el Congreso de los Estados Unidos.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for having me on today. It's great to have you at Voz News. I would like to start with your impressions on the convention.
So very happy to be here. Obviously, this is my first time speaking, so pretty historical, not just for me, but I think too, what we're seeing is there's a change within the Republican Party, and so when they're showcasing newer people, especially people from my background, I think it's pretty cool.
Yes, and I wanted to address that because, of course, I mean, you are Hispanic, and the Hispanic community has become very important and crucial for this upcoming election.
I think for future elections too, we're the biggest voting minority.
And not only that, but we like big families. So we are the fastest growing too.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just said it right. So what will be your message for the Hispanic community, especially because they're being lied to for so many years, for some media outlets that portrays Republicans as anti-immigrants, racist, you know. So what will be your message for them?
I'd say, and this is just based on what I'm seeing when I talk to people, right? A majority of Hispanic Americans are business owners. And so with this economy that we're currently seeing, you're not going to see a change unless we go back to the policies that President Trump had. You know, even just comparing 4 years ago, whether it's the price of gasoline or groceries, we had people that were able to afford things. Now, I mean, I just saw recently there was a viral story that it was, I think, a $450 tab from going to Whole Foods for a family. And so I think for us specifically talking about the economy, but then also too, you know, with illegal immigration, it hurts people that are trying to come here the correct way. And I think Vivek said it the best. He goes, you know, my parents were immigrants and they came here and they made some things for themselves. But for people that are coming here illegally, you know, they might not be all bad, but they're breaking the law, and you can't have a country that's, you know, run on people that are breaking the law. And so I agree with that sentiment. You know, it's interesting though. I am one of the youngest members of Congress on the Republican side.
Yes.
I am half Mexican, and when I first got elected, I think because of the fact that I'm able to articulate those facts, and also because of my blood, I was a target for the leftist media. And so I think it was maybe only a couple weeks after I got elected, the Washington Post put out this awful hit piece saying that I wasn't Hispanic enough. They kept saying that, like, what does that mean? You know, is it supposed to be because of my skin color? They tried to stereotype Hispanics as just being Mexican, which is not true. We're not just monolithic, but then also two, skin color. I mean, that's racist. And then obviously that, Time Magazine did a deep dive and they named me one of the top 100 most influential people in the world because I was telling the truth. And so, we have to use our voices and outlets like Vox to actually fight back against that narrative. But it's going to be interesting because I do think now you're seeing more Hispanics getting active than even a couple of years ago. And I think that that's going to be incredibly important moving forward.
Absolutely. And I have to say, you just mentioned that you're young, you're a Hispanic woman, beautiful, Mexican, I'm a Mexican too, So what would be your message for people? Because sometimes we Hispanics, we have strong values. We love our families. Yeah. We like to work hard. And as you mentioned, a lot of us are entrepreneurs. Yes. So, but a lot of them are not interested in getting involved in politics. But I think it's a mistake, especially because we are growing so fast and we really need representation. So what will be your message for that?
Everything that happens politically is going to impact your pocketbook. And so whether or not you want to get involved, you should. Otherwise, you have people that are up in Washington, and I've seen it happen. They would never spend their own money the way that they spend money here. The more that they spend in Washington, the more that inflation goes up, which means everything gets more expensive. And so just remember, even if it's at the local level, it all matters.
Finally, what are the challenges that District 13 is facing right now in Florida?
I'd say the number one issue that we're having right now is the economy. People are talking about how expensive everything is. In fact, so much so that people are actually getting forced out of Tampa Bay area and having to move because it's gotten that expensive. That in addition to we've had issues in the past with beach renourishment. So what I will say is, when you have an administration, you have political appointees, and because Florida's a red state, the administration has intentionally blocked our ability with the Army Corps of Engineers to protect our beaches and to restore them. And so what I will say is that you have an administration that likes to say that they care about the environment, but if you're in a red state, they don't.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Paulina. Great to talking to you. Bueno, y ahora está con nosotros la representante del Distrito 24 de Texas, Beth Van Dyne. Thank you so much for being with us at Voz News. It's great to have you here. So first of all, your impressions of the convention so far.
I'm telling you, I have never seen this much electric energy on the floor ever before. When Trump came out after the announcement of J.D. Vance, it was incredible. The amount of energy, the hope, the optimism, the fight that's happening right now. I am so excited for November.
Yeah, I have to tell you that image gave us all goosebumps because honestly, it was very emotional. I think it was a very emotional moment, especially after what happened on Saturday. I want to ask you about this because it was just revealed that there are some Iranian threats against President Trump. You are part of Texas. Texas is a border state, and we have had this illegal immigration for so long, allowing even terrorist people coming across through our borders. So why did you think a Republican federal administration will be the best option for the country?
I think it's been tried and true. I mean, we've seen in the first 4 years of Trump's administration what he was able to achieve. You think about the high economic growth rate that he had, the investments that were happening in American businesses into their employees, into their businesses to be able to grow. You look at the low interest rates. You look at what's happening with American energy, our ability to not only provide for our own nation, but then to be able to export, and without having to use military force, without having to use military influence, being able to just use our ability to be able to send over gas, be able to send over LNG to these countries, what that provided as far as influence from the U.S. You get to our border, and you mentioned it, that I'm a Texas representative. We have seen it firsthand. We've seen that between 12 and 15 million illegal immigrants who've come into our country that we have absolutely no idea who they are, where they are. And to your point, hundreds have been found on the terrorist watch list. Yes. Those are the only ones that have been caught. Those are legitimate threats. It's not a matter of if we're going to have a terrorist attack in our country, it's when. And if you think about who would be in the best position to be able to handle that and to be able to resolve that, you look at Biden and you look at Trump, and you look at Biden, who's basically hardly even awake
When he is, he's angry, he's confused. You know, his staff has to handle him versus Trump, who was very much his own man, who immediately after Saturday of being shot, his response was, hold on, I got to get my shoes, and he wanted to continue his speech
and remind people to keep fighting,
and then keeping that defiant fist up.
Do you think that the rhetoric that some Democrats have used for several years and also leftist media are to blame for what happened on Saturday?
I think the shooter is to blame for what happened on Saturday, but I think the division in our country that has just been perpetuated, you know, with Obama, you know, carried on by the Biden administration and the media. How many times can you call somebody Hitler? Can you call somebody Nazi, a hater, a bigot, a racist?
Yes.
The biggest threat to our democracy, and not expect people to react. And that has been historically, that is their narrative. It has been repeated over and over again. It is to make President Trump the enemy, the devil, a demon that has to be destroyed. You saw it on Saturday, and now other countries are looking at the weakness and they're taking advantage.
Of course, that's shameful and so sad. And finally, what are the challenges that District 24 is facing right now in Texas?
We're having issues with drug cartels. We're having issues with gang violence. We're having issues with fentanyl. Every single person is having issues with increasing costs of gas and of food. Of 20% rise in inflation, looking at historically high interest rates. God bless you. If you want to buy a house right now, if you're a first-time home buyer,
I've tried
it's impossible.
It is.
But thankfully in Texas versus places like New York or California, policies matter and we get it. We try to do everything that we can to actually encourage people to get there, encourage businesses to be able to grow, and respect the individual and their rights as opposed to trampling on them. That makes a difference. I think that's why you're seeing so many people moving to Texas and to places like Florida. We welcome them all.
Yes, because they see the difference.
Yep.
But thank you so much for being with us.
So
Great talking to you.
So good to see you.
Hacemos una breve pausa, quédese con nosotros que ya vienen nuestros analistas para hablar de todo lo que ha sucedido en la Convención Nacional Republicana y por supuesto de los temas que hacen titulares hoy. Seguimos en esta cobertura especial desde la Convención Nacional Republicana y bueno, evidentemente hay mucho de qué hablar sobre lo que ha pasado en estas últimas horas, pero no solamente aquí, sino también al exterior de esta convención. Y para platicar de ello están con nosotros Vanessa Vallejo, analista político de Voz News, y Alfonso Aguilar, abogado y analista político de Voz News. Y nos hemos enfocado y centrado muchísimo en lo que está pasando aquí. Son jornadas para platicarle un poco a la gente sin parar, desde temprano en la mañana hasta en la noche, que se llevan a cabo lo que son las pláticas de los invitados, de los speakers o de quienes están dando su discurso. Los discursos es una jornada interminable y vamos a estar platicando de ello. Así es, intensa. Pero antes quisiera que empezáramos con esta noticia que le hemos comentado en los paneles anteriores también. Se rumora que Biden podría hacerse a un lado de la carrera presidencial antes del fin de semana. ¿Crees que realmente lleguemos a ver eso, Vanessa?
No sé. Yo me sumo a la incertidumbre de todo el país, pero sí digo que me parece un poco inocente que después de todo lo que nos han hecho los medios, que sostuvieron a Biden durante 3 años y medio diciendo que no estaba para nada mal, vayamos a creer ahora completamente en todo lo que dicen. Hay algunos informes que dicen que posiblemente este fin de semana veamos una decisión y que sí lo está considerando, pero la verdad es que la Casa Blanca ha negado todo y el mismo presidente ha negado todo y ha dicho que él va a seguir adelante. Entonces no sabemos realmente cuál es el estado dentro del círculo más cercano del presidente Biden y puede suceder, pero también puede suceder que se quede. Es decir, yo no diría que es inminente la salida del presidente Biden.
¿Podría llegar a cumplirse la apuesta de Orlando Avendaño, que no está con nosotros, nuestro compañero de panel también?
No, estoy de acuerdo con lo que dice Vane, o sea, y ahí es que difiero con Orlando, nuestro colega, y es que yo no creo que está garantizado que él se vaya a retirar, no es algo inminente. Yo creo que hay más presión. Yo siempre dije que sería más posible si el liderato político de Cámara y Senado y algunos gobernadores le empezaran a poner presión y si más voces de políticos demócratas salieran a ponerle presión para que se retire. Eso está sucediendo, entonces yo creo que es más posible. Pero nuevamente, él es muy testarudo, ha insistido que quiere quedarse, la familia quiere que él continúe. ¿Quién sabe? Yo creo que es una posibilidad. Los artículos lo que dicen es que hay una posibilidad, no quiere decir que vaya a suceder. O sea que vamos a ver, sería interesante, pero aún si se retira, hay que ver, quizás abren una caja de Pandora porque pudieran tener una guerra intestina entre varios candidatos para buscar la presidencia. No sé, quien sea va a tener que vivir con el récord de Biden porque ninguno de los líderes demócratas se ha distanciado del récord de Biden tan desastroso, sino que siempre lo han acogido.
Claro, y ese es uno de los puntos yo creo que más importantes, sobre todo en este punto en la carrera presidencial. La Convención Nacional Demócrata está a un mes de llevarse a cabo, aunque se habla y se rumora que se podría adelantar la oficialización de Biden como candidato, pero ahora se dan estos rumores también. ¿A quién verían ustedes como sucesor de Biden si realmente llega a hacerse un lado en este punto?
Acaba de salir una encuesta de The Economist que dice que casi el 80% de los que responden la encuesta creen que debería ser Kamala Harris. Es decir, Kamala Harris, sorprendentemente para muchos, está subiendo en las encuestas y yo insisto en que eso se debe a los medios de comunicación. Es decir, para cualquier persona objetiva, Kamala Harris es un desastre. Es tan desastre que ya iba tan mal en las encuestas que incluso la baja popularidad del presidente Biden, la de ella era peor, era aún peor, no solo con la gente, pero también dentro del partido. Por eso los ojos de los republicanos solo se fijan en ella hasta el final, cuando ya todo el mundo está desesperado, porque no hay más que hacer. Ahora, yo creo que los medios de comunicación van a jugar un papel muy importante en empujarla y en decirle a la gente que esta señora que estuvo perdida 3 años y medio, en realidad ahora sí es súper buena y de repente sí tiene posibilidad de manejar este país de una buena manera.
Oye, a mí me llamó, y recordando, me llamó mucho la atención, escuchábamos hace un par de noches a Nikki Haley diciendo, imagínense Kamala Harris, que la única cosa de la que tenía que hacerse cargo era la frontera en toda la administración Biden, y mira el resultado de la frontera.
Por eso es más impopular que Joe Biden, pero sí, yo creo que ya hay un esfuerzo para tratar de reinventarla y presentarla como una persona visionaria y articulada, lo que no sé si a estas alturas van a poder lograr hacer. Pero el problema es que ellos tienen, es que si ellos optaran por otra persona, hay muchas personas, líderes en el partido que se van a molestar, porque van a decir, pues mira, ella es mujer afroamericana, es la candidata a vicepresidente, ella debe ser la nominada. O sea que si surgen otros nombres pudiera ser un problema. Por otra parte está el tema económico de una campaña. La única persona que puede recibir el dinero que hasta ahora ha recaudado la campaña de Biden es Kamala. Un nuevo candidato tendría que empezar a recaudar dinero a estas alturas, a 3 meses, es muy, muy difícil. O sea que yo creo que es posible sería Kamala, pero tratar de reinventarla a 3 meses de las elecciones va a ser muy, muy difícil. La verdad es que ella nuevamente está atada a las políticas desastrosas de esta administración que la mayoría del pueblo americano rechaza. Y además ella es quien es, no es una persona muy articulada y se va a ver por lo que es.
Vamos a estar, por supuesto, atentos a ver qué es lo que pasa. Algunos siguen apostando a que sí, veremos, porque Orlando Avendaño, él no está presente aquí, pero bueno, lo ha manifestado.
Muchas apuestas, ¿por qué a Orlando le gustan tanto las apuestas?
¿Verdad? Inminente, yo no sé. Pero hablemos ahora de nueva cuenta de la Convención Nacional Republicana. Anoche fue una gran noche. Vimos varios discursos emotivos, pero vamos a centrarnos primero en el del vicepresidente, el candidato a vicepresidente, el senador por Ohio, J.D. Vance, en donde él se abrió de una manera increíble, conectó con el público de una manera increíble, fue un mensaje emotivo. Primero habló su esposa, que también me pareció un mensaje bastante emotivo, luego J.D. Vance, y logró conectar realmente con el público de la convención, o sea, darse a conocer para todos aquellos que no lo conocían. Vanessa, ¿qué fue lo que más te llamó la atención de ese mensaje?
Bueno, a mí me parece un momento muy especial cuando él, por supuesto, habla de la mamá y le da el reconocimiento a la mamá, y la mamá pues llorando en el público al lado del speaker Mike Mike Johnson, que lo tenía al lado, y le dice J.D. Vance que en enero cumpliría la mamá 10 años de haber estado limpia de las drogas y que si el presidente Trump lo permite y si están en la Casa Blanca, que lo van a celebrar en la Casa Blanca. Ahora, yo me imagino que fue un poco lo que vi en Twitter y que creo que fue lo que todos pensamos cuando estábamos viendo esto, porque él habla de la abuela que fue quien lo crió. Y vi mucho en Twitter todo el mundo pensando que la abuela estuviera viva para estarlo viendo, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que cuando ya todo el mundo tiene esos sentimientos y piensa en eso, uno dice, de verdad que no solo el discurso, pero la historia es tan conmovedora, y creo yo que ahí es muy claro el mensaje de él. Hay muchos americanos, como en todos los países, como en todo el mundo, hay muchos americanos que quieren salir adelante, que se ven cuando están pequeños en una situación tan difícil y dicen, pues yo que voy a llegar a ser senador, o yo que voy a llegar, y eso es lo que él dijo textualmente. Yo nunca me imaginé que iba a estar ni en el Senado, ni mucho menos a la línea de vicepresidente, y por eso su discurso termina más o menos diciendo eso. En un eventual gobierno lo que vamos a hacer es luchar para dar las condiciones para que esas personas que como yo estaban de la nada, si se esfuerzan y trabajan duro, puedan conseguir grandes cosas, que es el sueño americano.
Qué mensaje tan poderoso, la verdad. Definitivamente su mensaje y su historia conecta con muchísima gente, y yo lo mencionaba anteriormente, incluso con muchísimos de nosotros los hispanos que de alguna manera enfrentamos muchísima dificultad y que a veces no pensamos que podemos llegar a ocupar esos lugares de privilegio, pero en este país esa es la bendición y grandeza de los Estados Unidos, que nos permite alcanzar lo que nunca imaginamos si nos esforzamos y seguimos ese camino. Y qué interesante mancuerna, porque por un lado tenemos a un Donald Trump, un magnate exitoso como empresario, que fue exitoso como presidente también, y hace esta mancuerna con un J.D. Vance que nos representa a muchos de nosotros los estadounidenses, comunes y corrientes.
Definitivamente. Es que yo creo que todo americano de clase trabajadora se puede identificar con J.D. Vance. Él viene de las montañas de Appalachia, vivió en un ambiente pobre con una mamá drogadicta, donde fue formado por su abuela, entró a los Marines para servir en la guerra de Irak, y gracias a eso consiguió el GI Bill, y con eso pudo ir a la universidad. Pero él dijo, mira, el sueño americano no es llegar a ser senador o tener mucho dinero, es sencillamente poder tú proveer para tu familia, tener tu casa, poder ir de vacaciones de vez en cuando, quizás que tus hijos vayan a la universidad. Ese es el sueño americano, y hay mucha gente hoy en día de clase trabajadora que ya no tiene esa posibilidad porque el dólar no rinde. Entonces yo creo que él enfatizó un mensaje que llega a esa clase trabajadora, y habló de cómo muchas políticas de las pasadas décadas han beneficiado a los grandes intereses corporativos, pero no a los trabajadores. Muchas de los acuerdos de libre comercio al final no han trabajado a favor de los intereses de los Estados Unidos, o por lo menos de la clase trabajadora. Me parece que fue muy acertado, fue muy bonito ver a su esposa, que es hija de inmigrantes, ¿verdad? Entonces yo creo que fue una muy buena presentación al país, a la nación. Demostró también ser una persona muy capacitada, muy inteligente, ¿verdad?
Joven, que además le ves un futuro más allá de la vicepresidencia.
Y muy calmado, o sea, muy calmado. Yo creo que llamó mucho la atención. Yo creo que fue un buen comienzo para él como candidato a la vicepresidencia.
Definitivamente, yo creo que todo el mundo recibió esa impresión. Otro de los momentos sumamente emotivos de anoche fue precisamente el ver a Peter Navarro, justo unas horas después de haber salido prácticamente de la cárcel tras cumplir esta sentencia de 4 meses por desacato, ¿no? Por no colaborar con esta investigación o esta orden de presentarse a declarar. A mí me llamó mucho la atención cuando él dijo, yo fui a la cárcel para que ustedes no tengan que ir a la cárcel. Fue un mensaje muy emotivo. Vanessa, ¿qué te llamó más la atención de esta aparición de Peter Navarro?
Bueno, yo creo que el escenario, el público estaba enloquecido cuando Peter salió, luego hacia el final, cuando él se pone otra vez emotivo y casi que llora, si no es que lloró. Yo en la cámara no alcancé a ver, pero podía haber estado llorando. También unos aplausos larguísimos, y yo creo que es ese sentimiento de agradecimiento de la gente que entiende que este hombre de verdad ya es cuando, digamos, sobrepasan los límites de lo que tienen que hacer y van mucho más allá por el amor al país y porque de verdad creen que están sirviendo y ayudando a construir algo mucho mejor o a parar algo que puede destruir el país, y ellos de verdad están defendiendo la democracia y creo que no es para nada una exageración decir que Peter Navarro es un preso político, fue un preso político, y que en Estados Unidos sí hay presos políticos.
¿Cómo lo ves tú, Alfonso? Porque por el otro lado tenemos, por ejemplo, a Merrick Garland, que sigue sin entregar los audios y no se toma ninguna acción en su
Lo
contra.
encontraron en desacato y no lo procesaron el Departamento de Justicia. Mira, yo creo que fue uno de los mejores discursos, de los más emotivos, totalmente apasionado. Y nosotros los hispanos, muchos de nosotros que venimos de países donde hay persecución política, donde se usa el aparato gubernamental para perseguir a la oposición, pues nos sorprendemos que eso ocurre en Estados Unidos. Y él hizo referencia a eso. No solo habló de su caso, y su caso ya es llamativo, porque él lo único que hizo es no asistir a una vista congresional cobijándose en el privilegio ejecutivo. O sea, fue un argumento, un asesoramiento legal de su abogado. Él no tenía intención de cometer ningún crimen. En más de 40 años no se procesaba a nadie por no comparecer al Congreso. De pronto el Departamento de Justicia lo decide procesar. Es claramente persecución política y termina preso. Él acaba de salir de la prisión.
Así decía,
y estaba
tiene?
aquí.
Porque es grande ya Peter Navarro.
Debe tener 70 y pico, honestamente, no sé cuánto, aunque se ve muy joven, él estuvo ahí con sus prometidas. Pero aparte de eso, también mencionó la otra persecución que hay. Habló de Steve Bannon, pero también la persecución de cómo el Departamento de Justicia está procesando criminalmente a activistas pro vida, mujeres de más de 70 años, monitoreando el FBI a padres que están yendo a reuniones de juntas escolares para saber qué le están enseñando a sus hijos.
Y que se les haya llamado terroristas domésticos.
Monitoreando a católicos practicantes. O sea, eso lo vemos en un país socialista, en Venezuela, pero aquí en Estados Unidos es algo inconcebible.
Increíble, se nos acabó el tiempo, hay mucho más que queremos platicar, pero síganos a través de las redes sociales. Por supuesto, también el discurso más esperado llega finalmente esta noche, el discurso del expresidente Donald Trump, y justo a unos días después, menos de una semana después del atentado que sufrió, Voz News va a estarle dando cobertura a través de todas nuestras plataformas, así que no se lo pierda. Gracias por su sintonía, cuídese mucho, que Dios lo bendiga, y si Dios nos permite, le esperamos mañana.